Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock, Drogheda. I'm Nick Park. I'm taking us through a series of teachings on Jesus in the Old Testament. It's actually based on a book that I wrote a number of years ago called 40 Days with Jesus in the Old Testament, the Son of God revealed in every book of the Jewish scriptures. And as we've been doing this series, it's taken a lot more than 40 days because there's not just one mention of Jesus in each book, but again and again and again, Jesus crops up in the Old Testament. Why? Because he's the theme of the Bible. The Bible is about Jesus. He is the center of scriptural revelation, both the Old Testament and the New Testament. And now we've got to the book of Jonah. And yesterday we looked at this. We saw a number of parallels between Jonah and Jesus, that Jonah really was a type, a foreshadowing of Christ in many ways. But one of the most notable ones, we didn't have time yesterday to really go into it like we wanted to, and that is how Jonah went to the belly of the whale and was in the belly of the whale, and Jesus went into the tomb. And listen to what Jesus said about it, because it was Jesus that drew the parallel between these two things. This is not something I or other Christians have dreamed up. It's Jesus that says this. In Matthew 12:39 to 41, the Pharisees asked Jesus to show them a sign. And Jesus said, "A wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but none will be given it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh will stand up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and now something greater than Jonah is here." So for Jesus, Jonah's experience in the belly of the great fish was a symbol of his own death and resurrection. And there's a number of indications in the book of Jonah that the prophet actually did physically die in the belly of the fish or the belly of a whale. By the way, we shouldn't worry too much whether it was a whale or a fish, because the Hebrew word simply means a big creature that lives in the sea. So it's not a scientific definition like you would have in a biology class, but it's just it was a big sea creature, either a big fish or a whale. And but the indications are that Jonah died in the belly of the fish or the whale. Jonah says in Jonah 2:2 that he cried from the depths of the grave. And the word translated grave is the word Sheol, which is normally in the Old Testament means the place where the dead went, sometimes even translated as hell. And then he says in Jonah 2:6, "You brought my life up from the pit." And the word for pit here was misahat, and it's used in Isaiah 38:17 to refer to physical death. So it's quite possible that Jonah died and was literally raised from the dead. A lot of Bible scholars do believe that certainly Jonah's experience was viewed by Jesus as a foreshadowing of his own resurrection from the dead. And that speaks very powerful to each one of us, because whether Jonah did physically die in the belly of the whale or not, and as I say, a lot of theologians, a lot of Bible teachers believe that he did, and that's a view I would be inclined to agree with based on the scriptural evidence. Jesus died. Jesus was in the tomb for 3 days. And because Jesus was in the tomb, he is the first fruits of the resurrection of the dead. So this is not just something Jesus had in common with Jonah. This is something that Jesus has in common with every single one of us, because unless we are still alive at the time of the return of Christ, we too will die. We too will taste physical death, and we too shall be raised from the dead as Jesus was. And I thank God that we can have confidence in that. That, some people might say, yeah, well, that was Jesus, but we're just ordinary people. Yeah, and Jonah was just an ordinary person. But as God raised Jonah from the belly of the fish and from the pit of hell and the grave, so God did the same with Jesus, and God will do the same with you and me. And for that, I'm grateful, and for this revelation of our future resurrection to be found in the book of Jonah. God bless you today, and join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock, Drogheda.